conditions. So this is a kind of trade-off. So variation in the size of seed crops in the plant, like dandelion one, this is the coconut palm. So this coconut palm contains enough nutrient for the coconut fruit to develop into new plant even after it is what swept away in the sea on the seashore into the seawater for longer time. So the exponential model describes population growth in an idealized unlimited environment. What is this one? It is the useful to study population growth in an idealized situation. Idealized situation help us understand the capacity of a species to increase and the condition that may facilitate the growth. Ideal condition is to give the maximum nutrition, maximum light resources to the individual and see how much they reproduce by the given time. So the studying the ideal condition will be helpful. So the zero population growth. What is zero population growth? Occurs the net zero population. You will call it as a net zero population growth. Occurs when the number of birth rate equal the death rate. Means number of young one is getting included in the introduced into the family, into the population, and the same number of individuals are also getting die in the at the same rate. Most ecologists use differential calculus to express population growth as growth rate at a particular instant in time. That is delta n upon delta t equal to r into n, where n is the population size, n is the time, and r is the rate of increase, and that is birth minus death. Delta n is the per capita rate of increase, birth minus death. So exponential growth graph, how it is constructed. So in exponential population growth, population increase under idealized condition. Under these conditions, the rate of reproduction is at its maximum. They reproduce maximally, called the intrinsic rate of increase. Means they put all their effort in the reproduction process. Exponential population growth results in a J-shaped curve. Means in the very early stage, they suddenly start producing, and in the very beginning, they reach to the saturation maximum level of the reproduction rate. But this exponential growth is not sustainable because at a time their overcrowding occurs and people start dying. Individuals start dying in that particular population. So you see here the number of generations. It attains the maximum number of them. This is known as carrying capacity actually. So it is the population size is shown on the Y panel. On X panel it is shown the number of generations. So for the red curve if you see delta n upon delta t is equal to 1n. Okay, it is 1. So it is increasing at a very high speed. Each generation is getting double. So by the end of the 5 generation, what you see, there are 5 individuals. Okay, but by the end of the 7 generation, there are about 1,000, 2,000. It is known as exponential growth and exponential rate. Again, this one is slightly bit slower than this. Is the 0.5 and also generating like this. So the J-shaped curve of exponential growth drives some rebounding population. It has J-shaped growth. So who is showing the J-shaped growth rate? So it is given the I came to the next slide. The logistic model describes how population growth occurs more slowly at its near its carrying capacity. Exponential growth cannot be sustained for a long time at any population. You were saying the growth rate of in the earlier slide, the elephant. At early age, elephants do not produce, but when they start producing, they produce up to 100 years. And each one individually produces by the time they attain the age, after some time. So if all those elephants survive by the end of 120 years, in 100 years we will see on the earth only elephants are roaming. But it never happens in that way. So that was the exponential growth curve, like the paramecium. You may have studied the conjugation and binary fission in paramecium. In that one also the exponential rate of growth occurs. In the early stage, each generation getting double within a half hour, within 1 day, within 25 minutes, by the process of the prime binary fission. So exponential growth cannot be sustained for a long time in any population. A more realistic population model is required to explain the growth of the population. So carrying capacity, what is this? It is the maximum population size that the given environment and a given area at a given time can support. So how many number of individuals can be accommodated in a room at a given time? Suppose that in a classroom, if the size of the individual is 50 people can sit in the classroom. The 50 can only sit, not 70 can sit. So the capacity of the room, that is also known as carrying capacity. If individual become more than 50 in that room, then there will be some struggle will happen, some fight will happen, some chaos will happen, and somebody will have to be kicked out. So the carrying capacity is the maximum population size the environment can support. And if the chaos occurs, there may be the chance that some collision occurs, some collapse happens, and everybody dies or everybody moves out of that room. So it is applied to the population also. If the population suddenly increases and increases to its maximum capacity, it overloaded the population in a geographical area, then there will be competition among the people, individual or people of that population for resources, and they will fight with each other, or they have certain detrimental effect on their survival. So in the logistic population growth model, the rate of increase declines as carrying capacity is reached. Means in the early time of the growth, the population is growing at faster rate. As it reaches to the maximum level of the carrying capacity of that area, the growth rate is also slowed down. The logistic model of the population growth source produces a sigmoid shaped curve. So if you see like this curve, so the population size is shown, number of generations. So see in the J-shaped curve, what we are seeing that by the end of 7th generation or 8th generation, the population has suddenly increased to the more than 2000, 2500 individuals have come to the population. But the capacity of the population, that environment is only, it can hold, it can sustain the life of only 1000, 1500 individuals. But because of the exponential growth, once it reached to the 2500 and suddenly it collapsed. Okay, everybody had to die and they will again come to the zero because of the high population explosion. But in case of the logistic model of growth, earlier the growth rate is slow, it is increasing faster, and by the time it reaches to the carrying capacity, the growth rate is slowed down. So what we can get a logistic growth for this equation is delta n upon delta t, it is equal to 1 into n and 1015 carrying capacity minus n upon k. So we call it as a k minus n upon k, and we can calculate the logistic growth rate of the population. The logistic model and real population. Again, there is question that this really happen that every population, ideal population follow the logistic model of the growth pattern? No. The growth of laboratory population of paramecium fits an S-shaped. In early life, they have the early stages, the very fast growth rate. Later on, as they crowd the population, they reach the carrying capacity, the growth rate is slowed down. The organisms are grown in a constant environment, like predators and competitors. There are no competitors, no predators, other species who can compete with them, so they are engaging in the stage. Some population overshoot K before settling down to relatively stable density. It also happens that in the logistic model, also the few population overshoot the carrying capacity due to the some unknown reason, and they do not reach the stable density. So you see, the growth of regulatory population fits in a shaped curve which hovers around the carrying capacity of the area. So this is the paramecium. So if you see initially the number of parameters it increasing with time, and by the 10 days the population is stabilized. It is not increasing any further. People, animals are increasing, then there is also decrease is also the number of individuals. It is a definitely a population in the lab. What happens? See here in the early days the growth rate is quite fast. They are increasing in number and suddenly they come they came beyond their carrying capacity to 180 and their population had, touched the level of the around 200 and suddenly they start decreasing and finally they reach below the carrying capacity and they will be maintained. So this is a population fluctuation. It is not following the sigmoidal curve. So it can happen in any population. Suddenly population will overshoot the carrying capacity, then it will, because of the struggle and that the top due to the some collapse, they will again come down to the carrying capacity. So the logistic model and life history. Life history date favored by natural selection may vary with population density and environmental conditions. So now it has come. The case selection, R selection. Okay. The case selection is a density dependent selection. Select the life history date that are sensitive to the population density. And R selection is the density independent selection. Select for the life history date, maximize what? Reproduction. R selection, case selection. R selection means female parasitic. Case selection means heteroparasitic. In our selection, the people produce only once in their life, while in case selection, people produce, individual produce at regular intervals, but in less number. Many factors regulate both population growth as well as dependent. We have two general questions about regulation of population growth. What environmental factor stop the population from growing independently? So what we see in the nature, the populations, every populations of the individual, they have the high reproductive rate, a slow reproductive rate, but they are constantly producing. Even then, their population is not increasing so much. What is checking them? How they are controlled? So why do some populations show radical fluctuation over time, while others remain similar? Some populations show stability, others immediately overshoot to the next level and then come down again to the below the carrying capacity. So there is some very large drastic fluctuation in the population and some populations are stable. So population change and population density. In density independent population, what happens? The birth rate and death rate do not change with the population density. Okay. In density dependent population birth rate and death rate rise with population density. Means the if the population density is increasing, the birth rate will be also fall and death rate will increase. So density controls the population size. While in density independent population, the birth rate, death rate had no effect on the population density. The population will be growing at its own pace. So density dependent birth and death rates are an example of negative feedback that regulate population growth. And they are affected by many factors such as competition. If the density increases, competition will start for resources. They will fight for habitat. Disease may happen. Predation one individual with another individual. Toxic wastage will be produced by the individual if they are living in the close vicinity, and those toxic waste will affect the life of the other individual and some other intrinsic factors. In crowded population, the increasing population density intensifies competition for the resources and result in lower birth rate. When individuals are engaged in the competition for the resources, fighting with each other for the shelter, food, and light, so they have not much time for the reproduction. So their birth rate is slowed down. So decreased population at high population. Okay, see the population size, percentage of juvenile producing land. So the lamb population in a or lamb is produced in the lamb with the young ones of the sheep. So if the population size is 200, then 80 individuals are lions, which young ones are 80. So if the population size is 300, the young ones are only 60 to around 60 individuals are there. And when population size increases up to 400, the number of individuals as a lambs are again reduced. And by 500 population size, the resources are limited at the same population, same place. When there are 5 individuals, the number of young ones are very little. When 20% individuals are young. While in the 200 population, when population becomes more than double, 3 times the growth rate, the birth rate, what happens? The juveniles increase by the, what you say, 80, it becomes one-fifth of the young one become there in the family. So if the population is 600, then the young ones will be 120, 20% only. And if the population is 200, then the young one will be about, how much, 80% is about 40% you have the young one. So territoriality means the advertisement of its own area in a given population, given geographical area. In many vertebrate and some invertebrate, competition for territory may limit density. People fight for their territory. Cheetahs are highly territorial, using chemical communication to warn other cheetahs of their boundaries. Means the two cheetahs cannot live in the same locality. They will show their territory, mark their territory. They will not allow the entry of the other territory by urinating at several places. So territoriality is owned by the cheetah. Cheetah mark its territory, and gannets. Gannets are the, like the water fowls found in the near the sea. They are also show the territoriality behavior. So disease, predation, and toxic waste. The population density can influence the health survival of the organism. In this population, pathogen can spread out more rapidly. As a prey population build up, predators may feed potentially on that. Okay. If the density of the individual increase in a population, there is chance of a disease. If disease is spread, it will consume more individuals because the density is more. So it will lead to the death of many individuals. And similarly, if the many individuals are living in a limited place, they will produce their toxic waste like urea and the fecal matter, and they do not have more place to discharge it, so it will accumulate, it will occupy the land, and it may cause the densely dependent detrimental effect on the life of the individual of that population. For some population, intrinsic factor, we have to regulate population size. Population dynamics. The study of population dynamics focuses on the complex interaction between biotic and abiotic factors that cause variation in the population size. Okay, so the population dynamics actually controlled by both living factor as well as the abiotic component of the thing. Okay, so long-term population study have challenged the hypothesis that population of large mammals are relatively stable over time. Weather can also affect the population size. So the so now we will see the number of mooses. Mooses are the like the deer animal, and the number of owls. What you find here that in a place like the in then the study has been done in the Switzerland. What you see, the moose are the herbivores, and the wolves are dependent upon their food on the life of the moose. Wolves eat moose. If the moose population is increasing at a time by the years of 1965, the population of the wolf is also increasing, but suddenly it drops. Again, population starts increasing, and the population of both increasing, but suddenly again there is a drop in the population of wolves. Then again the population of this one increases, the most population increases. As the population increases, then wolves again is to get their food and they eat it completely, and they start producing more and more, and by the time they cross again the population of the deers. Once they are more than the deers, the resources are scarce, even though they grow in size, but they again drop. So if you see that the population of the owl is dependent upon the population of deers at every point. Okay, there will be a pattern. Sometimes first the population of the deer will increase, then the population of the wolves will increase, and sometime and after that, the once the population of the deer has increased, the wolves are increased, and the deer population is low, then the population of the cheetah wolves will also come down as they don't get the enough. So its fluctuation is seen so much. By the 1995, what you find, once the population of moose deer becomes so high, at the same time the population of wolf is very less. But what happened immediately? The population of the wolves started increasing suddenly by feeding on the most of the mooses at the given place. And feeding was so drastic that the population drastically came down from 50 to 10, 50 to 10 deers, and the population of the whole increases, what you say, the 10 to 25. Again, what happened here? Once the food has come down, then there is again scarcity for food. If starvation is starting to the whole family, they also will come down. Once they can have come down, the population of the wolves, the population of deer again has started increasing. So there is a constant tug of war between the population size of the predator as well as the prey. Once the prey is, finally the number of prey is less, so it has been shown the number of mooses is 500 and the number of the wolves are 30. If you say the number of, so what you find here that by the end of the 2000, the number of wolves is 30 and the number of mooses are only 5. So it will again show the increase. Okay, the population of it will show decrease, it will show increase. So it is a fluctuation. So population cycle, scientific inquiry. Some population undergo regular boom and burst cycle. Boom means they will boom, then after that they will be controlled by the predator. Lynx population follow the 10-year boom and burst cycle of their population. Lynx is like the cat, which is predator of the rabbit-like hair individual. Okay, by 10 years of the age, in a 10-year span, first the population of lynx will increase, then the population of hare will increase, then the population of hare will start increasing, then it stops. These three hypotheses have been proposed to explain the hare's 10-year interval. Let us see what. So here again, the snow hare and lynx population. So the number of lynx in thousand. You see, so it is the population of lynx here has been shown by the red color, and the number of hares are shown by the blue color. So by 1850, what was there? The population of the hare was around 40,000. The population of lynx was around how much? It is 3,000. So if you see a fluctuation occurs, first increases the population of hare, then its population start increasing. The same pattern is followed here. Okay, hypothesis one. The hare's population cycle follows a cycle of Peter course. Means hare population will increase once it gets enough supply of the food after the spring. If the hypothesis is correct, then the cycle should keep if food supply is increased. Additional food was provided experimentally to the hare population and the whole population increased in size but continued to cycle. No hare appears to died of the starvation. Okay. So the second hypothesis, the hare's population cycle is driven by pressure from the other predators. In the study conducted by field ecologists, sorry, 90% of the hares were killed by predators, and this data support the second. As the population of hare become more and more, predator will feed on that. Third hypothesis that hare population cycle is linked to the sunspot cycle. Sunspot activity affects light quality, which is in turn affect the quality of the hares. If there is more sunlight, the more food will be produced by the plant, the more this food will be eaten by the hares. So the hair will show maximum growth, reproduction rate. If the sunlight is little, then it will show little growth. So immigration and metapopulation. Metapopulation are group of population linked by immigration and immigration. Means these populations are constantly in moving condition. High level of immigration combined with high survival can result in greater stability in the population. So human population is no longer growing exponentially, but it is still increasing rapidly. No population can grow indefinitely, and humans are not exception. Human population increased relatively slowly until about 1650. Growth was very slow, and then began to grow exponentially. Though the global population is still growing, the rate of growth began to slow during the 1960s. Most of the current global population growth is concentrated in developing countries. Means nowadays the maximum growth is seen only in the developing countries, whereas the developed countries the growth rate is more or less stable. So this is the human population growth. If you see it is starting from the beginning of the 8,000 before Christ. So it was very slow, and the plague causes the decrease in the population. Then there is increase in the population size. So now we are about 6.5 billion people in the world. So there is a constant increase, but population is at a high scale we are seeing like this one. So but it is not increasing at the alarming rate. To maintain population stability, regional human population can exist in one of the two configurations. Yes, human population can be controlled by certain factors, and any given time, the population will exist have a two mode, that is high birth rate minus high death rate. If birth rate is also high, death rate is also high. Means the if high birth rate is equivalent to the high death rate, there will be zero population. Another one is that low birth rate and low death rate. Again, there is zero population. Means in both cases, the birth rate and death rates are matched. But there is demographic transition in the population occurs, and first stage towards second stage after in most of the cases. Age structure. One important demographic is an important demographic factor which present in the future and which shows the present and future growth trend in the country's age structure. So age structure is the relative number of individuals that is given each age. Age structure diagram can predict the population growth rate. How whether the population is in growing condition or stable or aging population. They can illuminate social condition and also help us for the future. कैसे? Let us age structure pyramid of human population of three countries. If you see the three population countries has been shown. Okay, the rapid growth has been shown by the Afghanistan at the present time. Slow growth rate as shown by the United States, and no growth rate Italy. What is there? Male and female life. So in the rapid growth rate is what is condition? So it is showing the birth rate. Okay, so if there is the percent of population, or if you see the young one age is there, most of the populations are the in young age stage, 0 to 4 years. That is 80% of population is at the 0 to 4 age. Then 5 to 9 age is there. How much is there? It is decreasing by the age is less. So the young population is more, while the adult population is also less, and the old population is very little. So this population is a high potential for growth. So it is rapidly growing. If you see the United States population, what you will find? The number of young ones are almost equivalent to the number of adult people by the 55 years, and the old ones are still less. But it is likely that by the after some time, the many people will enter into the old age, and the young one will be still will be supplied at a constant. So we can say that this population is progressing towards the more or less stable state. And Italy population, what you see, the number of young people are less, while the adult people are more, and the old people are also less. And this population is showing a decline trend. Means by the end, this is showing like this one that in few years, the number of the old people will be more and the young people will be less. So how many human can the biosphere support? So how many people can live in this world? How many individual can be supported by that? Now we are about 76.5 billion people there on the earth. The carrying capacity of earth for human is uncertain. It is still not known how many human species can be accommodated on the earth. Average estimate is 10 to 15 million. At present, we are about 6.5. You might say that around 7 billion people are there in the world at present, and we can grow up to 15 million. So, the limits on human population size. So, what will limit our size, population of the human, how it will be controlled, how it can be put into the control by the environment. So what we say it is ecological footprint means how much environmental resources we require to control our livelihood. Okay? Ecological footprint. So the ecological footprint consists summarizes the aggregated land and water area needed to sustain the people of this. So the concept of ecological footprint summarizes the aggregate land and water area needed to sustain the population of a nation. Okay. So how many people a nation can have at a given time? If one measure of how close we are to the carrying capacity of the earth, okay, countries were greatly in countries vary greatly in footprint size, available ecological capacity. This is different for every country. It depends upon how much resources are being used by the individual in that country to survive. Our carrying capacity could potentially be limited by food, space, non-renewable sources, or build-up of the waste. So, if a person is living in very close to the nature, it means that he is living in a hut made up of the dried leaves and dried wooden wood. So, he putting the less stress on the environment and the forest and lands. So, many people can be afford it. And again, if we are living in a concrete house, the concrete is produced with the help of fossil fuel. For that, we have to cut the forest. Then it had to be produced. If it had to be produced by the concrete, it had to be produced by the electricity, thermal power energy, and the iron ores, and by the digestion of the other things. So we have to use the manpower, and that manpower will require food supply. Again, the what you say the impact will be on the environment. So in that way, living in a house made up of the wood and the grass is cheaper than the living in a brick house. If you live in a brick house, concrete house, you are putting almost 10 times more pressure on the environment in compared to the living in the house. Our carrying capacity potentially be limited by food, space, non-renewable sources, or build-up of the waste. So the review population growth curve, population size, even concluded by the carrying capacity, number of generations, and you should be able to understand few things. Define and distinguish between the following set of terms: density diffraction and how ecology is to with the density of the species. There are the certain topics you can finish it. These are the certain things you can do after reading this course. And thank you.